Okay. Good afternoon. This is Robert Bell, and you are watching Getting the Record Straight. As you know, this is our Black Rock and Soul edition where we talk with artists about art and music and culture. And please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, Getting the Record Straight. Before I introduce our guest and talk about him, and there's a great deal to talk about, he is a legend, but I want to extend our condolences and my condolences to two legends who passed this past week, last week. Of course, one is John Chaney, the legendary coach, college coach at Temple University, as well as Chaney. And actually before that, Gratz High School. Many people have expressed their condolences and sadness at his passing. And of course, the film star, great film star, Cicely Tyson, passed away last week also. So just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the contributions that they've made for all of us. And now to our guest today. As I said, I am just so fortunate today to have a legend with me. I was fortunate to see him, I believe it was 2019 at the Blue Note, his performance there, which was amazing. He's one of the greatest musicians, bassists, band leaders, composers in music history. He's the most recorded bassist, I believe, in history. At least I think that's noted in the Guinness World Book of Records. He's a graduate of Eastman School of Music, has a master's from the Manhattan School of Music. He was a member of one of the greatest bands of all time with the Miles Davis band that included Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Tony Williams, and himself. He's won at least 2 Grammy Awards, one for the soundtrack for Round Midnight. He's a professor emeritus of music, City College of New York. He's got an honorary doctorate from Berkeley. He's part of the faculty of Juilliard, or at least was. He's on the advisory committee and the board of directors of the Jazz Foundation.
Okay.
I told you I could be a while, but without further ado, let me introduce the great, great Ron Carter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us.
Who has the nerve to cut you off in mid-sentence?
Well, I would have been, I had another page to go.
I can feel it coming. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great, and so happy that you could join me. Thank you for taking the time out to share with us some of your experience and memories. Speaking of which, as I said, I think it was 2019 I saw you, and I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a journalist, and I said, yeah, I'm going to interview Ron Carter tomorrow. And he said, one thing about him, man, he always looks sharp. I love the way he dressed. And he was right on time with that. When I saw you up at the Blue Note, man, I mean, you were decked out, but tastefully, immaculate. So how did this incredible journey start with you? I was doing my homework and looked back and saw that you're from Michigan, Ferndale, Michigan. Is that was that a bastion of music and art, or was it the school or musical family?
That was 1 block from Detroit.
Oh, okay.
One day, as I was 10 or 11 years old, the teacher who was teaching the music program, they had those things in school back then, music programs. It seems like a long time ago.
Yeah.
All schools had some kind of musical program. And the person who was in charge of my district came by one morning between classes, and she had us come to a room. And in this room, she had laid out several instruments along the table. And she informed the band, she informed the kids that she was going to start an orchestra at this school, my school, as it turned out. And she said, we have our choice of instruments. Just pick one, and we'll get them going, and we'll have a fun time until you graduate from this elementary school. So, I guess we all looked at ones and kind of looked at each other and decided which ones we might want to strike out with. And somehow the cello seemed like a good instrument for me to try out. So I picked it up at about age 11 at the whatever grade you're in when you're 11 years old, and proceeded to take lessons and get better and better as I got along and changed teachers who were able to kind of help my growth, you know, who recognized that I was a little bit out of their purview, but they knew someone else who could take me to the next step. This continued until I got to a senior in high school, Cass Tech, by the way, in Detroit, well-known school at the time. And I noticed that the school officials would have these conferences and meetings of groups of people, and they always wanted some kind of music, and they always picked Cass Tech because they had probably the best music program at the time in high school to give them a great array of choices of people to perform this music from the high school. And I noticed that I never got the call. I thought clearly I was good as the other cello players. I should have had my share, you know. And I guess rather than accept that as being the end result, looked around, noticed that the bass player was graduating in January of 1954.
Mm.
I said, well, if there's only one bass player, they got to call that guy, whoever he is. I'm going to make that guy be me. So I traded my cello in, owed money. I got paper out and paid for it with the Detroit Free Press back in the day.
Mm.
And began to take some bass lessons. And I got the check. There was only one left. And I did pretty good. At some point during my senior semester, there was a person coming along to audition for music schools. And not knowing any different, I felt that here's a chance. So I auditioned as a bass player with a lot of nerve. Been studying the bass about 6 months at the most, and limited experience as a bass player. But he thought that I had some potential, so he offered me a full scholarship to the Eastman School of Music, which I held on to for 4 years, and became a good bass player. Not surprising to me, but maybe somebody else. But I wasn't surprised. And along the way, I was a part of a house band in Rochester that brought in singles. Dizzy Gillespie came in by themselves, Slam Stewart, Sonny Stitt. I was able to join that house band and just outside of Rochester, New York, and I would play weekends, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with those singles that came in, and start to get a handle on what this music took to be proficient. Good is another word. I wasn't even aware of that word. I just want to get what's going on here. In the meantime, when I would go home to Detroit for vacations or holidays, my neighbor was an alto player who loved, at the time, Dave Brubeck had just made his Jazz Goes to College record. It's a really big record. And he was kind of enamored with not just the Dave Brubeck library, but Paul Desmond. So this guy played really good alto. And he had the piano player friend and the drummer. All he needed was a bass player. So I said, well, I don't really know many songs, but I got a decent ear and I know how to transcribe. So that'll get me over the first couple of nights, we can do this. And that's what I did. That was my summers. During the course of my play in Rochester as a house band bass player, bands always came through. Horace Silver had a band with Teddy Kotick and Art Farmer, and Dizzy Gillespie's early band was there. Carmen McRae had Isaacs playing bass. Junior Mans, Sam Jones, were really wonderful bands. And they all told me that in New York, it was always looking for a good bass player. When I finished school, they recommended that I come to New York and try my luck. So okay. In the meantime, 1958, there was a show in New York called Jazz for Moderns, run by Ed Sarkeesian. This is a major package show. It had Miles Band, had Maynard Ferguson's band with Wayne Shorter and Slide Hampton, Lambert Hendricks and Ross, Dave Brubeck, and Chico Hamilton had a quintet. This is when they had these really big package shows. They would travel throughout the East and West Coast. This time they would come in from Canada through New York City to get back to New York. And Chico Hampton heard me as a black cello player at school. So I met him. Because at the time, the cello player was going to leave the band. He's going to go back to New York, back to California. So Chico said, look, I read the book. We had a little quiet audition, in the practice rooms, He said, oh, wow, okay. Well, when you get ready to graduate and you come to New York, I'll be at Birdland. Stop by, and if the cello player doesn't leave, I'll give you the job. I said, okay. You know, I'm worried about exams and the next meal and stuff. You know, I can't worry about that right now. So anyway, I did graduate, and I did get my sheepskin, and I went to New York August of 1959, and I met Chico Hamilton at Birdland.
Mhm.
He said, man, sorry, man, the cello player's going to stay. But if you don't play bass, I got a bass chair open. I said, well, that's good. Got same four strings, man. Just got to stand up longer. Okay, I can do that. That's the band had Eric Dolphy and Dennis Buttermere. You know, a really good band. So I was in that band. Oh, I'm back to Rochester. So after the concert, someone was supposed to take Miles Davis and the band to the train station because they were coming back to New York right after the gig. Well, nobody showed up. And so someone who knew the promoter introduced me to him, Ed, and he said, look, I got this guy who needs to get to the train station, but there's no transportation. Can you take him to the train station? Well, it's about a mile away from the, you know, I got all day, man, you know. So it was Miles in the band. So it was Miles and train, and myself got my little 1954 and went to the train station. That was my first meeting with Miles. Now, I didn't see him again anymore until I'm in New York. This is 1963. I'm at the club at the Blue Note down on Spring and Hudson, April of 1963. And I was happy to work with Art Farmer, Jim Hall, and Walter Perkins. Man, I was learning tunes every night. Jim knew how to comp. I had the changes. Art was the perfect soloist. Walter played good time, and I'm still growing. You know, trying to find out how this is supposed to work. And then during the course of that first night, Miles came in and stood by the jukebox. Remember those things? And he called me over after the set and explained to me that the band was breaking up, his band. Wynton and Paul were going to leave his band to form a quartet with Wes Montgomery. Jimmy Cobb was going to finish the tour, which had 6 weeks to go because he wasn't worried about a drum. He needed a bass player yesterday. Was I available? I said, well, not quite. I'm working with Art Farmer for the next 2 weeks. So if you'll ask Art Farmer to relieve me of my obligation to him for these next 2 weeks and I can join you, absolutely. Until then, Art Farmer got a bass player. So he went over to ask Art Farmer after a while, you know, what the situation was. He wanted to hire me, but I said I had to ask your permission first, you know. And Art said, of course, you know. And so I said, okay, I'll get that straightened out. So after the night, Art called me over and he was just stunned that I would, he said, make Miles talk to him. I said, Art, I told you, man, this is a 2-week gig. And you know, it no longer will be that when you say it's not going to be that. I'm not going to be the guy to do that. Until you say I'm free, I'm not free, man. I'm obligated to you, and I'm enjoying this band. Jim, I'm learning how to comp. I'm learning how to play chords. I'm doing all that stuff I need to learn how to do. I'm not saying I'm not qualified for Miles's band. I'm saying I'm happy here because I'm committed to you. He said, oh, man, that's art, please. Done. And I think that set the table for me and Miles, our relationship, because he understood from that point. And that was a band like being in heaven. And Miles Davis Quintet, that was it. Here's this guy telling me, I need a bass player. And he's it, but he's not available because he's not got out of gig. I'm not using this vocabulary right now, but it was kind of rough, you know. Miles, please, you know. I think that opened a door for a really special relationship because he understood the obvious quandary that I would have been facing if I accept quandaries. I can have one right now, man. I'm working with Art Farmer. Yes, you're the best band there is, but I'm working. I'm happy where I am. At any event, that started me with the Miles Davis Band for the next 5 years and some odd months.
Mm-hmm.
Up to talking to you just about right now, in between.
Did you, you had done some work with, you had done your own album with Eric Dolphy. Was that after that or before that?
Before.
Okay.
About 1961, 62, something like about 61, yeah. Called Where.
Right. And was that particularly a different style type of thing than what you started doing with Miles?
Well, I like to think that all of our experiences Herbie and Tony included in this case, are a product of our environment. We weren't just playing bebop kind of tunes. We were involved in avant-garde music. Sam Rivers had a nice studio. Tony knew Sam from Boston, so Tony was already aware of the avant-garde view of jazz. Herbie was doing his gigs on his own with these various kind of outside bands. I was working with a guy named Don Ellis, if you know his name from the avant-garde days, and Jackie Byard. So I was already a part of the. I was aware of the Art Ensemble of Chicago, for example. I was already aware of those kinds of groups, and I had done my diligence in playing with some of those kind of music. So we were not new to that concept. You know, I think in hindsight, Miles picked the three guys, in this case, me, Herbie, and Tony, who were probably in both camps, who understood the avant-garde point of view, but who were clearly steeped in the tradition of his tradition. And he took a chance that these guys will make it work for him. And I think he was pretty close.
And you stayed pretty close, particularly, I guess, with Tony and Herbie. You did a lot of work with Herbie over the years, right?
Yes.
During that time.
Yeah. We talk occasionally right now, so, I still look forward to whenever I have a chance to talk with him, those really good moments for me. And we've both kind of gotten on our own individual lines right now, but at some point we'll get together again and have a fun time chasing chords.
Not being a musician and really knowing music, I read something on your website, I guess it's attributed to you, where it said rather, I think that the bassist is the quarterback in any group, and he must find a sound that he is willing to be responsible for.
Okay, let's go back one paragraph. I don't read my site often, but whatever's in there, I endorse. And it probably is my words.
Yeah.
So if you were looking for you to say, I'm not sure I said that, I'm not going there.
Okay.
Just give me the bullet and I'll bite it, but that's mine.
Yeah.
I mean that. I think bass player, if they understood the power they have, I don't mean the volume, if they understood how much they're important to the band. I explain to my students on a regular basis that each note they play, just think about that, Mr. Bell, each note they play, could you get your head right into one tune? A tune lasts 8 or 9 minutes, basically, the bass player is playing nearly every note for those 8 or 9 minutes. Agreed? By and large, it's just a drum solo, but by and large, and I tell these guys, every note you play affects the band. One thing it has is the harmony. It tells these guys what he thinks the chord is. 2, he tells these guys what the form is. This is the beginning of the tune. This is the bridge. This is the last. He tells these each with the same note. He tells them what the rhythm is. You play a waltz, a bossa, a Latin, what that is, He tells them the pitch, or who's in tune with who, who's out of tune, He tells them the dynamic, and I don't mean necessarily the louds and sobs, but that's part of it too, But the dynamic of the bass being there, every note he plays, it has these elements. When we work again, when this intermission is over, I look forward to playing with my band and telling them, guys, theory class just started. I control it. The bass player controls all that stuff, man. And those are my words. Maybe I had a little fewer letters in that saying, but yeah, I believe that the bass player is the quarterback of the band. And the better he gets, the better the band gets, because he's the guy who's playing everything for every, not just one chorus at a time, for every note.
So let's take that concept just a little further again for the layman like myself, and who loves music and a lot of different types of music, and reading different things. You see journalists and commentators who say, well, this guy is the greatest, that guy's the greatest. And I think they're often talking about dexterity. or ability to play a lot of notes or play a lot of notes fast or something. Is that what is great in your mind? Is that what connotes greatness to you? Is for a person's proficiency or dexterity in terms of the instrument?
Well, for me, part of that word great is something I don't use very often unless it's a meal. That is a great meal. That kind of stuff. Uh, I'm not sure how many musicians really understand the role of the bass player. I think until they give it a bass player who kind of commands that kind of attention and they begin to respond to this other force, other source of information, it's kind of difficult for them to get to all the letters in the word great, to make it the GR, you know. But unless they hear what I'm playing, they're not going to see AT for a while, you know. I've played with some wonderful players, man, and a lot of them fit in that great category. But to ask me who they are means that I'm saying that those who I don't name don't fit there. And I'm not stepping in that hole this morning. I loved all those guys. And I learned every night was a free school for me. Don't do this. This is better. Maybe not that. But try this. You go, stuff every night. And I'm listening in stereo. All this stuff, man.
Yeah.
I'm taking in, if you got a quartet, I'm taking in 3 other views for every note that I play. And I want them to hear. I want them to be aware of my impact for those 3 notes. For example, 3 notes I play. There's a reason I'm playing those notes, man. I'm going over here. But to make that work, they got to believe that I know where I'm going. Even if they don't like the note choices, that was a good choice. And as I'm standing, I stand by those choices. If you don't like them, here comes some more for the next chorus, or the next night, or the next tune.
That's interesting. It really is. I thought it was really interesting to see that in the 2000s. Let me see. You did some work with Tribe Called Quest and Verses from the Abstract, the CDs, which I'm familiar with, Red Hot and Cool, The Stolen Moments, and Red Hot and Indigo, I believe it is, with Mos Def and Talib Kweli. Talk about those experiences a little bit.
I'm not sure what you mean talk about. What that's always a tough question for me because the question is so open-ended. I could talk about saying I made them and that's comfortable for me. But you want some different detail. I need to know how to get that to you other than
you enjoyed them, I take it.
Well, that's another question. If you ask me that, I can answer that right away. Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been there much more than one chorus. I look at all those kind of projects with Q-Tip and the other, Gil Scott Heron. They're all strangers to me. And I know their music broadly speaking because you hear it on the radio, but I didn't know them. I never saw them perform live. I had no records of them. I just knew what I heard on the radio and commentary from my friends who were a little more updated to the music than I was, But I seem to have enough trust in my sensibility of helping someone that I thought, these guys, boy, they sound pretty good. What a good bass player could do with these guys even more. And when Gil Scott called me from Washington, for example, or Brian, his piano player, I didn't know Gil. I just knew his voice from one of my friends in Washington told me, and that they thought that I could help their project. Well, what a challenge that is. As it turned out, man, that record he made, the Revolution that would not be televised, that's still killing today, man. Way before these guys got really hip to that kind of literary impact. Leroy Jones and Gwendolyn Brooks and Angela, they all had a way with words, but none of them were able to put it to that format that Gil Scott Heron did. And that the whole record is just, it's as current as it's for 2030, man. It's really on it, But I enjoyed that process because I had never been involved in that kind of that kind of music and word connection, and the guy who's making the words expects me to help him. That's what and he's telling me, hey man, do what you do is supposed to work here. Help this party get started. Bring in some hats, bring in some horns. Bring some shakers and some confetti. You're the guy supposed to do that. Okay, you really mean that? Yeah, man. Here it comes. Bam, dude. That, you know. Uh, Last time I played with singers like that, who had that view, were folk singers in the early '60s. And I played Bill Lee. When I came to New York, Bill Lee was the bass player that every folk singer had to have.
Mm.
He played wonderful notes, man. He had a great sound and a great ability to hear what the song was supposed to do with just him, guitar player, and an average singer.
Mm.
And when Bill got too busy, he would call me and say, "Hey, Stretch, I got a couple of gigs. I can't do them. Can you fill in for me?" Yeah. So I learned how to play with folk singers who needed a different kind of note from me, a different kind of presence. But if I had not had that experience and know how they sang the folk songs and that kind of political history, I worked with Leon Bibb Sr., really a wonderful blues singer, Josh White. They really understood the words of a blues lyric. They helped me help someone like Miles, who can play at that kind of lyrical sounding note group that I could transfer from these guys in 1960, early 60s to Miles 1965. Or Q-Tip. Their language skills were kind of not my style, And I said, look, I can try this with you because I'm really new to this zone. But the language starts walking sideways, guys. My car's outside and the motor's still running, and I'm taking the chance that it'll be there when I'm ready to leave early, because I will leave early. And he said, oh, no, Mr. Carter. I said, okay, let's read the poem. And the words were so interesting to me. I said, I know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm playing the key of F for these guys. That's the sound. That's the tone center.
Mm-hmm.
And we did 2 or 3 takes, and I went home early, my scarf on, and got out of town, and I had a great time with those kids.
Yeah.
Well, it's those experiences that we brought to the Miles Band. And it's those experiences that helped all of us be able to come to a view like we ended up by doing.
Fantastic. I that sound of dealing with the Black experience from a political standpoint that Gil Scott talked about. I had Gary Bartz on a couple weeks ago, and he said that's even with Gil Scott, it wasn't new. That folks have been doing that even before him. So that thread of resistance, if you will, frustration of liberation, that's always been expressed in certainly in Black music and jazz and through poetry. So the merging of it is just, I guess, a natural thing.
Did you hear Gary's record with him singing that Langston Hughes poem, I've Known Rivers?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Gary made a record singing called I've Known Rivers, a Langston Hughes poem.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. He was singing those kind of lyrics and saxophone in the early 60s on Riverside with Orrin Keep News.
Mm-hmm.
So he understood the meaning of, he understood the feeling of how he can make a saxophone connect with the political words at the time with music. Excuse me a moment, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Gin and tonic, hold the gin.
He was also talking about, what Max Roach was doing in the early 60s too, and Abby Lincoln. So again, that feeling and that movement, if you will, towards resistance, liberation, all of that kind of thing. It's beautiful to see that there's that legacy that continues on even till today.
Yeah, jazz music has always been used to draw attention to the civil rights cause and financial viability. Jazz guys have always done benefit concerts for various uh, civil disobedience groups. Core for one, you know. The
Mm-hmm.
record Miles Davis live at Lincoln Center, My Funny Valentine, and four more.
Mm-hmm.
Those were played for Core. The benefits
Mm-hmm.
fundraising for them. It wasn't just a record Miles made at Carnegie Hall. That was a smaller picture.
Mm-hmm.
Bigger picture is for Stokely Carmichael and that group of people who were
Mm-hmm.
really, really in the front lines with lunches for kids. Excuse me again. Pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
I had some more. I'm gonna have to go to the well and get some water. Hold on a minute.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You know what a well is, man? Go to the well and get some water.
Right.
Don't go away.
Okay.